How about it for a guy who joins us on Tuesdays, and his timing just couldn't be better with the shadow of the J6 recommendations and referrals to the Justice Department. He's David Cay Johnston, the Pulitzer Prize winner, co-founder of DCReport.org. Hi, David. Good morning. And what a summary, just to see all the evidence again presented so coherently, so starkly. I wonder if you could give us a sense of what happens next and your impressions.
Well, the referrals have no significance in themselves. I don't expect the Justice Department to pay any attention to them, but turning over all of the evidence that the committee has, including the newly revealed evidence from Hope Hicks yesterday, very close Donald Trump aide, who made it clear that before January 6th, she had a discussion with him about violence, and Donald wasn't the least bit caring that there was going to be violence. That will be very valuable to Jack Smith, the prosecutor who now oversees all the Trump matters at the Justice Department. The more significance of this, though, I think is political. This is my former newspaper that I worked for, the New York Times, with a headline that I think perfectly captures the significance of this. It's a banner headline. Times doesn't use those a lot. Jan 6 panel accuses Trump of insurrection. And that finding and the recommendation he be prosecuted for aiding and abetting insurrection is important because were he to be convicted, he can never hold any public office. He can't be the dog catcher. He cannot hold any public office anywhere in the United States.
I thought also, just because we're holding up copies of the New York Times, I always liked somebody else who gets the paper, the actual paper. I thought the Haberman piece that did the analysis of Trump's fading image, both his political currency and his personal currency, and how that's been damaged, not only by what he said and done. Obviously, the guy is, he serves up, controversy and then these things that you can't step away from, like, having dinner with white supremacists, this kind of thing. He serves that up like a short order chef. But she talked about J6, the committee, and how he was damaged by all of this evidence being brought to the fore.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, Mark. And I also think it's important. Maggie Haberman is an excellent reporter who's taken an enormous amount of abuse from people who don't understand what journalism is. Donald talked to Maggie. And if you read Maggie's work, you understood what Donald was saying and trying to get out there pretty clearly. That's a valuable function in journalism. And yet all sorts of people would say, why aren't you, taking him apart? It's not her job to take him apart. It's her job to tell you what he's saying and doing that you're not seeing, especially not seeing in the sense that he's only doing this behind closed doors. And Trump's position has clearly fallen. First of all, any Republican who cares about winning can read the results of the November elections and realize that Donald is toxic. Secondly, he is having his mind concentrated by the prospect of being incarcerated. He's becoming crazier and crazier. And the committee, with those 10 hearings, has pretty much put in the public mind, as well as you can do, everybody, I would say, except the true blue Trumpers who believe he's virtually a god, that this guy had no regard for our Constitution, as I've been trying to tell people for more than 7.5 years, and was the principal threat to our democracy and continues to be a threat until he's diminished into insignificance.
Well, David, he also birthed a couple of things, and it's always interesting to talk to you about these different phenomena, political phenomena. So these phenomena are both related to other candidates. I'm thinking of like a Carrie Lake, for example, election deniers, Trump fealty, not even in question, saying the outrageous, saying it confidently, being good and comfortable on camera in the new media. And there are a bunch of people like that. I mean, they make Marjorie Taylor Greene look like what she is, which is a moron, because they're smoother. I mean, talk about Ron DeSantis, I put in the same category, They represent something beyond Trump, that he I don't know if he birthed it or he unleashed it. I mean, it was always there, this hostility. um, take America back for white Christians type thing. But that's certainly one of the things that continues, regardless, I guess is what I'm getting at, what happens to Donald Trump.
Well, Donald has unleashed some horrible forces in America that have always been there. And that's a real ongoing danger to the Republic. But keep in mind that most of these people that he brought to the forefront have turned out to be clowns and have been rejected. The shameful thing is, how did a guy like Herschel Walker get 49% of the vote?
Kerry Lake and Herschel Walker both came close, David.
Yeah. And that speaks to the sad state of civic life in America. Social studies teachers will object to what I'm about to say, but we really are not teaching civics the way we used to. When I was in junior high school in California in the early 60s, I had to pass a test to get out of 8th grade that said I have a basic understanding of how our Constitution works. I now teach law students, and I'm astonished at the number of them who really don't understand the basics of how our Constitution works. Now, you don't perhaps need to know that to be a lawyer. Most of that specialized work, you do divorces, you do contracts, you do real estate. But I still am troubled by the lack of a sort of core understanding of how our Constitution works. And very few, even so, the basic Constitution without the Bill of Rights is only about 4,000 words. Very few people have ever read it. And many of them haven't read it and said, wait a minute, what does this line mean? Because, of course, it's written in 18th century highbrow English.
That's the beauty of it. You can interpret it any way you want, apparently.
Well, and you can do what the Supreme Court's done. You can edit out the first words of the Second Amendment about a well-regulated militia.
I'll have you know that I have an 8th grader who is studying U.S. history, and part of that is the Constitution. She's got to memorize all the articles and talk about what each one means. And the most recent project I helped her with was how the electoral process works, whether you would keep it the way it is or change it, and a discussion of the Electoral College. So it's been interesting in her classes. I don't think it's as bad as maybe you think it is here in California.
Well, Kim, I think that's great, and I'm glad to hear that. But keep in mind that the latest national literacy research shows that more than half of adults read at the 6th grade level, and about 20% read at 3rd grade level. And I don't think you can critically process information at those reading levels. My economics books were very carefully written to be understandable to someone with a high school diploma. I got lots of letters from people who said, I don't understand this or that in it. And, I put the sentences into the Fleisch, whatever it's called, reader, and they would say 10th grade level.
Right.
There's a real problem with literacy. And I'm glad your 8th grader is getting that kind of education.
Yeah.
One of the things about education in America is about 15% of American kids get as good an education as you can get. The functional equivalent, I would argue, of private schools, better private schools, but the vast majority do not.
And that's why you get the 40% voting for Herschel Walker.
Yeah, and we get.
David. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just, when it comes to Herschel Walker and Kerry Lake, I think there's another phenomenon, and I would suggest I know he's an idiot. I said this yesterday, I think, on the show. I know he's an idiot. I know he's incompetent. I know he's a liar, but I want that Senate seat, and I'm just going to hold my nose and vote for him. And I think there's a component of that. It was transactional in a sense, the way the Trump deal with the alt-right and the Christian right was transactional.
And Herschel Walker wouldn't be the first incoherent, incompetent to ever serve in the U.S. Senate by far.
There's that.
If he won, but Donald has certainly unleashed real serious problems. He's given permission to racists and anti-Semites and violence-prone people to act, and it's going to be very hard to push that back into the bottle. But over time, I'm hopeful we're able to do that, because democracy has to be based on as the founders and the framers intended. And they're not the same groups of people. The Declaration of Independence and the Constitution only had about a 22% overlap in their signatories. We need to understand that reasoned, rational debate is what a democracy relies on, and you have to defend the rights of speech and conduct by people you absolutely detest if we're going to have that kind of robust debate. That doesn't mean, however, you can commit crimes, and I've used for you before the example of reviving the Aztec religion, which you can do up until you start to kill somebody on an altar.
Right. I want to mention before we completely leave the January 6th thing that on dcreport.org, it's the website I mention all the time with David Cay Johnston. He co-founded it. There's a breakdown of the insurrectionists and the kind of profile of the insurrectionists, because we all have a sense of what that was like. We've seen the images, disturbing as they are, and we have a sense of who those people were. You guys do a pretty good job of, the contouring of who these people are, the specifics, the details. I wonder if you could speak to that for a second.
John Komlos is an economist who has a double PhD from the University of Chicago. He taught for many years at University in Munich and is now retired. And he went through the arrest records of over all 900 and some people who were arrested, got their zip codes, extracted the income data, because the government publishes zip code level income data. And the common theme in news coverage had been, these are business owners, they're reasonably or moderately successful folks. And he shows that's not true. There were no poor people arrested, or virtually no poor people. And most of these people are sort of below average, but not significantly so. And he points out that why would poor people be in this demonstration? Because unless they lived in Washington, D.C., they wouldn't have the resources to travel there. And these people, I think, largely fall into the category of folks who feel they should have had a higher income, a sense of entitlement and unfairness. And that, I think, is a perfectly reasonable perspective for them to have based on the government policies I've been writing about. But nobody except DC Report has tried to analyze the social status of these people in terms of their incomes. And there's a nice little graphic in there. And Komlos, who's the author of if you're going to study economics, a superb introductory textbook called something like What Every Economics Student Should Know. He's a very clear-thinking, serious economist who doesn't get lost out in arcane and obtuse areas.
Yes, obtuse is a ding word. It is true. It's laid out quite clearly, and I learned something because I had a sense of these people. And I do believe that Trump and many of these Republicans, generally masquerading as populists, they do animate these parts of America, and they are substantial, that feel left out and feel as though they've been jobbed by this system. Then they see what they point to. It's even happening in the chat now. I just glanced over, which is the sea of people coming across the border. We do have a border problem, as do many developed countries. And neither party has an answer, but both use it as a device to win over the populace politically. Anyway, you see the rise of this group, and you do a great breakdown, or he does a great breakdown at DC Report on just that group.
Yeah, and by the way, Mark, I've studied this particularly when I was teaching the law of the ancient world. I've never been able to find a wealthy society near an unwealthy society that's been able to stop people from entering the country by one means or another. It does not appear ever in human history. So what you do is you adopt policies. The Romans embraced people coming to Rome when it was the wealthiest city in the world. And by doing so, were able to actually strengthen their position for a long time until the corruption at the top brought about the demise of that society. So I don't think either party will end up with a solution to this. Certainly not so long as Central America is both poor, and having been to Honduras 3 times in this century, I can tell you the State Department is right when they tell you that Tegucigalpa is the most dangerous place in the Western Hemisphere, and you don't want to be there.
Well, I mean, Mexico ain't that much better. I mean, maybe you've got almost nothing but populations that would love to flee to this country. You have to do something about this flow. On the other hand, as I say, neither party really wants to do anything. The Title 42 extension that just came down, that essentially parks everybody in Mexico. But it's not a solution for, and with the backlog for asylees and, for asylum seekers, it's a mess, David, for sure, is it not?
Oh, absolutely. We don't have a sound immigration policy. Ronald Reagan put forth in his administration an amnesty program. And I was living in Los Angeles when this went on, and my wife was working at the California Community Foundation, and she oversaw a program they set up. You had to put out about $800, which would be about $3,000 in today's money, to qualify. And the Community Foundation set up a program to loan people this money at no interest. Every single dollar was repaid. I have checked back with some of the people who used the amnesty to get their status legalized. One of them was the guy who did the plumbing work on our house in the Mount Washington area of Los Angeles. And they have prospered and they've done well. And the research shows the people who get up and leave somewhere and come to America, whether it was my ancestors in the 1800s and the 1700s, or the people who are right now on the other side of the border from El Paso, they are the doers and the movers. And when they come here, it takes one generation, sometimes two, but they prosper.
Sure. And you see that with the DACA stats
those
also.
Are the people are going to do things who come, not the people, the sluggards.
No, it's a good point, and the DACA the kids are amazing. I mean, those stats are incredible. They outpace every demographic in America in terms of education, holding jobs, staying out of law enforcement trouble. It's remarkable. I mean, they have the arrest records lower than the average American. So, but the question then is, and you get this from Randy in the chat, and we'll wrap up here in a second. So, what are we supposed to do? Just let anyone in that wants to get in? No. Go ahead, David.
Randy raised a very good point. So why do people leave? And let me pick on Honduras, since I know it well, and my late sister-in-law was a U.S. diplomat there. Because of the actions of a number of administrations in both parties. This is a country run by narco-traficantes and gangs. One of the local newspapers, when I was there, published a huge 2-page map. These are the neighborhoods in which gang controls them. Sometimes they rob bus drivers, and a bus driver who says, "I don't have any money to give you," they'll just shoot you right in front of the passengers to make the point. You got to pay. They grab 12-year-old girls off the street and force them into prostitution. So, Randy, if you had a 12-year-old girl and you're living in Honduras, are you going to let them grab your daughter and put her into prostitution, or are you going to do something? We need to develop a foreign policy that helps create viable democracies, that helps create governments where drugs are not the controlling factor. We've seen this in Mexico. We've seen the repeated theft of government money by Mexican presidents, and the just outrageous attacks on the New York Times journalists who exposed this and did a really good job of it. Saying they're the criminals, very Trumpian, by the way, to do that. But we have to reduce the incentives to come here, and the biggest single one would be turning lawless societies like Honduras into reasonably lawful societies. And as John Smith points out, there's a very similar gang problem in Mexico. Journalists get killed there all the time. Police get killed. Honest judges get killed, and the Mexican government does not deal with it because it's part of the criminal element.
Yeah, and this is really speaking to what we have to wrap up, speaking to the challenge that we have in this hemisphere, and that is to raise up. I mean, I've seen in the chat, what do? We go invade and kick out all the... No, but you have to begin a program. And we have begun this, by the way. The U.S. has these programs. But it's a pretty steep mountain to climb. The programs that lift up the economies and try to sort of decorrupt a lot of these societies that are rotten to the core.
Yeah, and so long as we support murderous dictatorships because we think we have some larger geopolitical interest, we're not going to get anywhere on those issues. People are going to popularly elect leaders we don't like. Our goal should be, how do we help other societies create? And by the way, one last, since you brought all this up, foreign aid spending by the US is absolutely minuscule compared to Japan, the European countries. As a share of our economy, it's bupkis. And foreign aid is an American jobs program. When we send IBM computers to a country in Africa, we're creating jobs here in the US for engineers and designers and fabricators. And it's always been that way.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. And if you want to find all that money, the foreign aid money, the rebuilding money, take a trip down 495, get off at the Pentagon exit, and you'll find it all there, man. I can't believe that's for the next conversation. I've already ranted about it once this week. I can't believe the amount of money that's being poured into the Pentagon, more money than was even requested by the administration. It's an absolute steal. It does nothing. And you saw what happened with the B-2, is it the B-2 Stealth? They just grounded the whole crew. And they just grounded all of them because of problems. So we're paying for weapon systems that don't even work a lot of the time. Anyway, David, I love talking to you. Thank you for letting me rant for a second there. DCReport.org is the website. David, of course, has all the books, best-selling author and Pulitzer winner. Such a thrill to talk to you every week. And David, I guess Merry Christmas. Will you be with us the week after Christmas? Can you join us?
Yeah.
Great.
So
I love it. I love it.
Merry Christmas. Go SoCal.
Drive safely.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Be well. Good to talk to you. David Cay Johnston, everybody. Yeah. Very cool stuff.
Can I lob something at you that popped into the chat?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
There was a guy, sound like a sir, basically
no,
right
I
now.
just,
Hello, Mark Tom.